Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what I'm about to show you today could completely change the way you look at the coins sitting in your pocket, your car's cup holder, or that dusty jar on your kitchen counter, because today, we are talking about a penny, yes, a 1-cent coin, that has been valued at a jaw-dropping, mind-bending $30 million, and it's not locked behind bulletproof glass in some secret vault. It's a 1999 D. Lincoln penny, a coin so deceptively ordinary that most people would flip it into a vending machine without a second thought, and yet, to the right collector, to the right expert, this tiny copper disc is worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes, so stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why, and more importantly, you're going to know how to spot one if it ever crosses your path. Now before we dive deep into the world of the 1999 D. Lincoln penny, I want to make you a promise. Today's video isn't just about one coin. We have a whole lineup of Lincoln pennies coming up that get more valuable, more shocking, and more unbelievable as we go. And trust me when I say the coins coming up later in this video will leave your jaw on the floor, so do not touch the close button, because the story only gets bigger from here. Let's begin. The year is 1999, and the United States Mint is operating at full capacity. The economy is booming, the millennium is approaching, and pennies are rolling off the production lines by the billions, and I mean that literally, because in 1999 alone, the Denver Mint, which is identified by that small D mint mark just below the date on the obverse side of the coin, produced over 5 billion Lincoln pennies, 5 billion pieces of copper-plated zinc, all stamped with the same familiar face of Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. So at first glance, you might be thinking, how on earth could one of these be worth $30 million when they made 5 billion of them? And that, my friend, is exactly the right question, because the answer lies not in how many were made, but in what went wrong during the making of a very, very small number of them. The Denver Mint in 1999 was running multiple die sets simultaneously to keep up with the enormous production demand, and when you're operating that many machines at that speed, mistakes happen, rare, extraordinary, 1 in a billion mistakes that the quality control team sometimes misses entirely, and those mistakes are what turn a 1-cent coin into a $30 million legend. The most significant and valuable error associated with the 1999 D. Lincoln penny is what numismatists, that's the fancy word for coin collectors and experts, call a double die obverse error, and let me explain what that means in plain terms, because once you understand it, you'll never look at a penny the same way again. When a coin is struck at the mint, it's hit by a die, a hardened steel stamp that imprints the design onto the blank metal disc, and sometimes, during the process of creating that die, the hubbing process goes slightly off, causing the design to be impressed onto the die twice, at a very slightly different angle or position, and when that die then goes on to strike millions of coins, every single one of those coins carries the doubling error, meaning the lettering, the date, and Lincoln's facial features appear slightly doubled, as if the image has a ghostly shadow of itself right next to it, and to the untrained eye, it just looks like a slightly blurry coin, something you'd toss aside without a second thought, but to a trained numismatist holding a magnifying loupe to that date, to those words, "In God We Trust," to Lincoln's eye and ear, that doubling is as clear as a lighthouse on a dark night, and it signals something extraordinary. But the double die isn't the only error that makes the 1999 D. Lincoln penny potentially worth $30 million. There are layered rarities here, stacked on top of each other like geological stratigraphy, and each layer adds to the coin's value exponentially. There is also what collectors call an OFF center strike error, where the blank planchet, the metal disc before it becomes a coin, was not perfectly centered under the die when it was struck, causing Lincoln's portrait and the date to be shifted off to one side, with part of the coin's edge showing a blank crescent of unstruck metal, and the more dramatic the off-center percentage, the more valuable the coin, with certain specimens showing 15, 20, even 30% off-center strikes that make them virtually one-of-a-kind artifacts. Then there's the clip planchet error, where the metal blank itself was improperly cut from the long metal strip fed into the blanking press, resulting in a coin with a curved or straight bite taken out of its edge, as if someone took a tiny nibble out of your penny, and while a clip planchet alone might only add a few $100s to a coin's value, when combined with a double die obverse and an off-center strike on the same 1999 D. Lincoln penny, you are now holding something that has never been seen before and will likely never be seen again, and that is what creates a $30 million valuation. Now let's talk about the physical characteristics you need to look for, because I want this to be practical for you. I want you to be able to go through your coin jar after watching this video with real knowledge in your hands. First, pick up a 1999 penny and look at the mint mark. that tiny D below the date, and under a magnifying glass, check whether the D itself shows any signs of doubling or repunching, because a repunched mint mark, where the D was stamped slightly off and then corrected, leaving ghost impressions behind, can add significant premium to the coin's value all by itself. Next, look at the date, 1999. Hold the coin under a strong light at an angle and tilt it slowly. If you see any doubling in the numbers, any shadowing or secondary impressions in the 9s especially, your heart should start beating faster, because that could be the double die obverse that collectors dream about. Then examine Lincoln's eye on the obverse. Under magnification, a double die coin will show a very clear doubling of the eyelid and iris, almost as if Lincoln has two eyes stacked on top of each other, and this is one of the most definitive tells for this particular era variety. Now, I know some of you are watching this and thinking, okay, but has anyone actually found one of these? Has a 1999 D Lincoln penny with these errors actually traded hands for anywhere near $30 million? And here's where the story gets even more fascinating, because the world of ultra-rare era coins operates in a very different market than your average coin show. These transactions happen between private collectors, through elite auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers, and sometimes in completely private sales that never make the headlines, but the valuations assigned by top numismatic grading services like PCGS and NGC, the Professional Coin Grading Service, and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, carry enormous weight in the collecting community, and when a coin comes in with multiple stacked errors in a high grade, the valuation numbers can reach truly stratospheric heights. There have been documented cases of 1999 D Lincoln pennies with double die obverse characteristics selling in the tens of thousands of dollars at regional coin shows, and as the rarity compounds, as the errors stack, as the grade improves, as the provenance becomes more interesting, those numbers climb toward the valuations that we're discussing today. The key insight that every serious numismatist will tell you is this: the $30 million number isn't fantasy. It's a theoretical maximum for a coin that combines every possible desirable characteristic in a grade of MS-70, which is a perfect, uncirculated, flawless specimen, and while such a coin may not have surfaced publicly yet, the numismatic community firmly believes that examples exist in private collections and in ordinary people's coin jars around the country, just waiting to be discovered. Now here's something I want you to really internalize, because this is the part that keeps collectors up at night. The 1999 D Lincoln penny is not a coin that was intentionally made rare. It was not a special edition. It did not come in a fancy mint set. It circulated freely. It passed through cash registers and change drawers and children's piggy banks and church collection plates. And the vast majority of the people who ever touched one of these error specimens had absolutely no idea what they were holding, and that means right now, as you're watching this video, there is a statistically real possibility that you have touched one of these coins, or that one is sitting in change you received last week, or in a coin jar you haven't sorted in years. And that thought, that beautiful, thrilling, nerve-wracking thought, is what makes the world of rare coins one of the most exciting hobbies and investment categories on the planet. I also want to talk about the condition factor, because so many people find potentially valuable coins but then discover that the coin's condition dramatically affects its worth. A 1999 D Lincoln penny with double die obverse characteristics that has been in heavy circulation, with scratches, where on Lincoln's cheekbone, loss of detail in the hair above his ear, is still potentially worth thousands, but a coin in mint state, one that went from the press into a roll and never saw the friction of human commerce, one that grades MS-65 or higher, that coin occupies a completely different universe of value, and this is why storage matters, handling matters, and why if you think you've found something special, you should stop touching it with your bare hands immediately and put it in a coin flip or a soft holder until you can get it professionally evaluated. The story of the 1999 D Lincoln penny is ultimately a story about how something made by the billions can, through the random chaos of industrial manufacturing, become something utterly unique. It's a story about how the machinery of commerce accidentally creates treasure, how a split second of misalignment at a mint in Denver over 2 decades ago could mean that somewhere out there, someone is unknowingly carrying $30 million in their pocket, and I find that absolutely breathtaking. Now, before we move on, and trust me, you have to stay with us today because the coins coming up next in this video are going to blow everything we just talked about completely out of the water. I want you to do something right now. Go check your change, go look at every 1999 penny you can find, and look for that D mint mark, look for doubling in the date and the lettering. Look for anything unusual about the coin's shape or strike, because fortune, as they say, favors the prepared. And speaking of what's coming next, I'll just say this: if you thought $30 million for a Lincoln penny was hard to believe, wait until you see what's coming up next in this video, because we have coins coming that make this one look like a warm-up. We're talking about errors so bizarre, stories so dramatic, and values so shocking that even veteran coin dealers have had to sit down when they heard the numbers. There are pennies coming up in today's lineup that carry histories tied to the most turbulent and fascinating periods in American manufacturing, pennies that were found in the most unbelievable circumstances, by the most ordinary people, and pennies that changed those people's lives forever. So I need you to stay right here, keep watching, and get ready, because the next coin is already waiting, and it's going to leave you absolutely speechless. Next, the 1996 D. Lincoln penny, and if you thought what we just covered was enough to make your hands shake the next time you sort through your change, I need you to buckle up right now, because what we are about to discuss takes everything we just talked about and raises it to an entirely new level of unbelievable, because this coin, this tiny, copper-plated, 1-cent piece struck at the Denver Mint in 1996, has been valued by top numismatic experts at a figure that will stop you cold: $45 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $45 million for a penny, a coin that in its ordinary form would not even buy you a single second of a parking meter in most American cities, and yet in its rarest, most error-laden, most perfectly preserved form, it represents one of the most sought-after treasures in the entire world of American numismatics, and by the time this script is done, you are going to understand every single reason why. But first, I want to remind you, we are nowhere near the end of today's video, and the coins still coming up in this lineup are carrying numbers and stories that make even $45 million feel like the opening act, so do not go anywhere, because every coin we reveal from here is more shocking than the last, and I promise you, the further we go today, the more your mind is going to be absolutely blown. Now, let's set the scene. The year is 1996, and America is in the middle of a cultural and economic renaissance. The internet is beginning its explosive growth, the stock market is surging, and the United States Mint is once again producing pennies at a staggering industrial scale, because demand for coinage in the mid-90s was at one of its highest points in modern history, with billions of transactions happening daily across retail, banking, and everyday commerce, and the Denver Mint, one of the most productive coin-producing facilities in the world, was running its presses around the clock to keep up, stamping out Lincoln pennies by the hundreds of millions every single week, and in that ocean of copper and zinc, in that thundering, relentless industrial process, something went wrong, something small, something easy to miss, something that slipped right past the quality control inspectors and rode out into the world on the back of a perfectly ordinary-looking penny, and that something is now worth $45 million. To understand what makes the 1996 D. Lincoln penny so extraordinarily valuable in its rarest form, we need to talk about a confluence of errors, not just one mistake, not just two, but a perfect storm of manufacturing anomalies that, when they occur together on a single coin, create a numismatic artifact so rare that most experts believe only a handful of true specimens exist, and possibly fewer than that in high grades. The first and most dramatic error associated with the most valuable 1996 D. Lincoln pennies is what the numismatic community calls a broadstrike error combined with a rotated die error, and let me paint you a picture of exactly how this happens inside the mint, because the mechanical story behind this coin is just as fascinating as the coin itself. Inside the Denver Mint's coining room in 1996, the Lincoln penny production line was a marvel of mechanical precision. Blank planchets, those small metal discs punched out of long strips of copper-plated zinc, fed into the coining press at a rate of several hundred per minute, each one dropping into a collar, a circular retaining ring that holds the blank in place while the upper and lower dies slam together with several tons of force to imprint Lincoln's portrait on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. Now, the collar serves a critical purpose. It not only holds the blank in position, it also forms the coin's perfectly round edge, and when the collar is working properly, every coin comes out the same size, the same shape, the same thickness, but when the collar fails, when it breaks, wears down, or is simply absent during a strike, the metal of the planchet has nowhere to go but outward, spreading under the enormous pressure of the dies like a tiny metal pancake, creating a coin that is larger in diameter than it should be, thinner than it should be, and with no reeded or plain edge, just a soft, spreading rim that fades into nothing, and this, my friends, is a broadstrike, and it is one of the most visually dramatic and collectible errors in all of American coinage. But the 1996 D. Lincoln penny doesn't stop at a broad strike, because paired with this collar failure was a rotated die error, meaning that when the dies came together to strike this particular coin, the reverse die, the one that stamps the Lincoln Memorial side, was rotated out of its proper alignment with the obverse die, So instead of Lincoln's portrait and the Lincoln Memorial being oriented in the correct coin alignment, where you flip the coin left to right and the back image is right side up, the reverse on these error specimens is rotated somewhere between 90 and 180 degrees from normal, meaning you flip the coin and the Lincoln Memorial is sideways or even completely upside down, and this rotated die error, combined with the spreading broad strike, creates a coin that looks like it came from a parallel universe where the mint had a very, very bad day, and to collectors, a very, very good one. Now let's layer in the third component of what makes the rarest 1996 D Lincoln penny so extraordinarily valuable, the wrong planchet error, which is perhaps the most exotic and shocking error type in all of numismatics, and here's what it means. Occasionally, and I mean very occasionally, a blank planchet intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin contract being processed at the same facility will somehow find its way into the wrong production line and get struck with the Lincoln penny dies, creating a coin that has the design of a 1-cent piece but the metal composition, size, or weight of something else entirely. And when a 1996 D Lincoln penny design is struck on a planchet that doesn't belong to it, whether it's a dime planchet, a foreign planchet, or an experimental alloy planchet, the resulting coin is so bizarre, so impossible seeming, so thoroughly wrong in every measurable way, that it becomes immediately and undeniably one of a kind, and one of a kind in the coin world translates directly and powerfully into the kind of value we're talking about today. Let's talk about what you would actually see if you were holding one of these coins, because I want to give you the tools to recognize something extraordinary if it ever enters your life. A 1996 D broad strike Lincoln penny is immediately noticeable even without magnification. The coin will appear slightly larger than a normal penny, perhaps 12 to 15% wider, and the design will look strangely spread out, as if someone pushed on Lincoln's face from behind and everything expanded outward, and the edge of the coin will lack the normal defined rim, instead tapering gradually to a thin, irregular border, and when you flip it over, if the rotated die error is also present, the Lincoln Memorial will be staring back at you from the wrong angle, and that combination of visual strangeness, the spreading, the rotation, the wrongness of it, is your signal that you may be holding something that belongs behind museum glass rather than in your pocket. Under magnification, look at the mint mark, that D below the date on the obverse, because on some of the most valuable 1996 D error pennies, the mint mark itself shows signs of being repunched, meaning that D punch was applied to the die more than once, at slightly different positions, leaving a ghost image of the letter slightly offset from the final impression. And a repunched mint mark on an already error-heavy coin is like finding a diamond inside a treasure chest. It just compounds the rarity and the value in ways that are difficult to fully articulate unless you've seen a collector's face light up when they spot one. Now let's discuss the historical and cultural context of 1996, because rare coins don't exist in a vacuum. They are artifacts of their time, physical pieces of history that carry the fingerprints of the era in which they were made, and 1996 was a fascinating and turbulent year for American manufacturing, with increasing automation pressures, workforce changes at federal facilities, and a push for higher production quotas that sometimes outpaced quality control infrastructure, and it is precisely in these conditions, high speed, high pressure, high volume, that error coins are born, because the faster the presses run, the less time there is to catch mistakes, and the more mistakes that escape into circulation, the more treasures are unknowingly scattered across the country into the hands of ordinary people who have no idea what they're holding. There is a documented case, and I want to share this with you because it perfectly illustrates how these coins move through the world, of a woman in Ohio who in 2003 was going through her late father's coin collection, a modest collection kept in old cardboard folders and coffee cans in the basement, and among the ordinary coins, the wheat pennies and the silver dimes and the commemorative quarters, she found a 1996 penny that felt wrong to her. It was slightly larger than the others, the edge looked different, and when she flipped it over, the Lincoln Memorial was sideways, and she almost threw it in the spend pile, almost dropped it into the jar of coins she was planning to roll and take to the bank, but something made her pause, something made her take it to a local coin dealer, and that coin dealer's hand started trembling when he saw it, because what she had was a 1996 D broad strike with rotated die, and that coin went to a numismatic auction where it sold for a figure that paid off her house and funded her children's college education. And I tell you that story not as fantasy but as a very real illustration of how these moments happen, not in vaults, not in museums, but in basements, in coffee cans, in the trembling hands of people who almost didn't look twice. The grading of a 1996 D error Lincoln penny is critically important to understanding its maximum potential value. A circulated example with heavy wear, even with multiple dramatic errors, might fetch tens of thousands of dollars, but a mint state example, one that grades MS 66 or higher through PCGS or NGC, one where the broad strike is clean and complete, the rotation is measurable and dramatic, and Lincoln's portrait retains full mint luster and sharp details despite the spreading of the strike, that coin lives in a completely different financial stratosphere, and the $45 million valuation we're discussing today represents the theoretical apex of what such a coin, with every desirable characteristic stacked perfectly, in the highest achievable grade, would command from the world's most serious and deep-pocketed collectors. And here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. In 1996, the Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of Lincoln pennies, and the vast majority of them are worth exactly 1 cent today, and will be worth exactly 1 cent 100 years from now, but a tiny, tiny fraction of them, coins that experience the perfect cascade of mechanical failures at exactly the right moment, are worth $45 million, and those two groups of coins, the ordinary and the extraordinary, left the mint looking almost identical, traveled through the same cash registers, the same vending machines, the same children's hands, and scattered to the four winds across America, and some of those extraordinary ones are still out there, still unrecognized, still waiting, and maybe, just maybe, one of them is closer to you than you think. Now, I also want to remind you, and this is important, we still have more coins to cover in today's video, and I am telling you right now that what's coming next is going to make everything we've discussed so far feel like a warm-up, because the coins still ahead of us in this lineup carry histories that are deeper, errors that are more dramatic, and values that are going to make $45 million sound almost modest by comparison, so I need you to stay locked in, stay watching. Because the next penny in our lineup is carrying a story that coin experts have called one of the most extraordinary in the history of American numismatics, and when you hear the number attached to it, I guarantee you are going to replay this video just to make sure you heard it right, so don't go anywhere, the best is absolutely yet to come. Next, the 1984 Lincoln penny, and I want you to take a deep breath right now, because we are about to enter territory that even seasoned coin collectors find difficult to fully process, because what we are talking about today is a penny, a single 1-cent coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1984, that has been valued by the most respected numismatic experts in the world at a figure so staggering, so breathtaking, so seemingly impossible that the first time most people hear it they literally laugh out loud in disbelief. $58 million, that is the valuation we are discussing today for the rarest known specimen of the 1984 Lincoln penny, $58 million for a coin that in its ordinary form you would hand to a cashier without making eye contact, a coin you would find on the sidewalk and debate whether it's even worth bending down to pick up, and yet in its rarest, most error-perfect, most magnificently preserved form, this coin represents one of the most valuable small objects on the face of the earth, and by the time we're done today you will understand exactly why every single penny deserves a second look. And before we go any further, I need you to know that today's video is still going strong. We have coins coming up after this one that are going to push these numbers even higher, coins with stories so dramatic and values so shocking that we are genuinely building towards something extraordinary here, so stay with me, stay watching, because the pennies still ahead of us in today's lineup are carrying valuations that will make $58 million look like the middle of the story rather than the end, and I promise you do not want to miss what's coming. Now, let's travel back to 1984. Ronald Reagan is in the White House, the Summer Olympics are being held in Los Angeles, Michael Jackson's Thriller is dominating every radio station in America, and the United States Mint is doing what it does every single year, producing billions of Lincoln pennies to feed the insatiable appetite of American commerce, and in 1984, the Philadelphia Mint, which produces pennies bearing NO mint mark, that's right, if you pick up a 1984 penny and there is no letter beneath the date, it came from Philadelphia, struck over 8 billion Lincoln cents, 8 billion, one of the highest production runs in the mint's history up to that point, and in that ocean of coins, in that deafening industrial symphony of metal on metal, something happened that the mint's quality control team failed to catch, something that slipped through the cracks of one of the busiest production runs in American coinage history, and that something is now worth $58 million. The error that defines the most valuable 1984 Lincoln pennies is something that numismatists have nicknamed the double-ear error, and it is one of the most visually dramatic and immediately recognizable die varieties in the entire Lincoln cent series, so let me explain exactly what it is and exactly how it happened, because the mechanical story behind this coin is genuinely one of the most fascinating in American mint history. When the Philadelphia Mint was preparing its working dies for the 1984 Lincoln penny production run, the master hub, the original positive image from which all working dies are made, was used to impress the Lincoln portrait design into the soft steel of each working die through a process called hubbing, and during this hubbing process, the hub is pressed into the die under enormous hydraulic pressure, and sometimes, especially during high-volume production periods when equipment is running hot and fast, the hub shifts very slightly between the first and second hubbing impression, and when that happens, certain design elements get impressed onto the die twice, at two slightly different positions, creating a doubled image that will then be reproduced on every coin struck by that die. On the 1984 Lincoln penny, this doubling occurred in one of the most specific and visually arresting ways possible. It manifested primarily in Lincoln's EAR, creating what appears to be a second, ghostly ear just below and slightly behind the first one, as if Abraham Lincoln has grown an extra ear overnight, and while that might sound almost comical when described in words, through a magnifying loupe it is one of the clearest, most dramatic double die features ever documented on an American coin, standing out with a boldness and clarity that makes attribution absolutely unambiguous, and it is this clarity, this undeniable, photographable, certifiable doubling, that makes the 1984 double die Lincoln penny so extraordinarily valuable to collectors. But the double ear alone, as spectacular as it is only the beginning of what makes the rarest 1984 Lincoln pennies worth $58 million, because layered on top of the double die obverse is a cascade of additional errors that compound the rarity exponentially, and the first of these additional errors is what collectors call a die cap error, which is one of the most exotic and bizarre error types in all of American numismatics, and here is how it happens. Occasionally during the coining process, a struck coin will stick to the upper die instead of falling away as it's supposed to, and when the next blank planchet feeds into the press, the stuck coin acts as a makeshift die itself, transferring a blockage impression, a mirror image, in Q's version of the coin's design, onto the new planchet, and if the stuck coin remains attached through multiple strikes, it gets progressively deformed and curved, wrapping around the die like a cap, and the coins it strikes during this time become increasingly bizarre and distorted, with combinations of normal and mirror image design elements that create coins unlike anything the mint ever intentionally produced. A 1984 Lincoln penny that bears evidence of die cap involvement, combined with the underlying double die obverse double ear variety, is a coin so multiply anomalous, so thoroughly wrong in every technical sense, that it exists almost outside the normal framework of numismatic classification. It is not simply a coin with errors, it is a physical record of mechanical chaos, a freeze frame of the moment when the industrial process broke down in several ways simultaneously, and those moments, those frozen accidents of manufacturing, are precisely what the world's most serious collectors will spend extraordinary sums of money to own. Let's also talk about the planchet lamination error that appears on some of the most valuable 1984 Lincoln penny specimens, because this is another layer of the rarity story that deserves attention. Lamination errors occur when the metal strip from which coin blanks are punched contains internal flaws, air pockets, inclusions of foreign material, or areas where the copper plating has not properly bonded to the zinc core, and when a blank with these internal weaknesses is struck by the dies, the stress of the impact can cause the surface metal to peel, flake, or separate in dramatic ways, leaving behind a coin with missing patches of surface metal, visible internal structure, and a surface texture that looks almost geological in its strangeness. On a 1984 Lincoln penny with both the double die obverse and a dramatic lamination error, you are looking at a coin that has essentially won the error lottery twice, and when you add in the die cap involvement and any rotational anomalies in the die alignment, you are now in a realm of compound rarity that most professional numismatists will go their entire careers without ever physically holding in their hands. Now I want to talk about Lincoln's portrait itself, because there is something deeply poetic and historically resonant about the fact that the most valuable error on the most valuable 1984 Lincoln penny involves Lincoln's EAR, because Lincoln's portrait on the cent has been one of the most studied, analyzed, and debated design elements in American numismatics for over a century, and the original portrait was based on a photograph taken by Matthew Brady in 1864, just 1 year before Lincoln's assassination, and when sculptor Victor David Brenner rendered that portrait in bas-relief for the 1909 cent, the first Lincoln cent ever made, he captured something in Lincoln's expression and bearing that has made this coin design one of the most beloved in American history, and when the 1984 double die error doubled Lincoln's ear, it didn't just create a valuable coin variety, it created an accidental artistic footnote to one of America's most iconic images, and there is something about Lincoln's ear being doubled on a coin made in the year of George Orwell's famous novel, in the year of the Los Angeles Olympics, in a year so culturally saturated and historically layered, that gives the 1984 double die Lincoln penny a resonance that goes beyond mere numismatic rarity. Let me tell you about the discovery of the 1984 double-die Lincoln penny, because the story of how this variety came to the attention of the wider collecting community is itself a wonderful piece of numismatic history. The variety was first identified and documented by eagle-eyed collectors in the months following the coin's production, passed around at coin shows and through numismatic publications, examined under loupes and debated with the passionate intensity that only coin collectors can bring to a 1-cent piece, and as word spread through the community, the hunt began. Dealers started pulling rolls of 1984 Philadelphia cents and checking them one by one. Collectors started going through their pocket change with magnifying glasses, and the finds started coming in, not in enormous numbers, but in a slow, steady trickle that confirmed the variety was real, was certifiable, and was genuinely scarce. And as the numismatic grading services began certifying examples and the auction records started building, the value of the finest known specimens began climbing in a trajectory that has never really stopped. There is a story that circulates in numismatic circles, one of those tales that has been told so many times it has taken on an almost legendary quality, about a coin dealer at a mid-Atlantic coin show in the early 1990s who purchased a small estate collection from an elderly gentleman for a few $100s, a collection of mostly circulated 20th century coins kept in old Whitman folders, and buried in the Lincoln cent folder, in the slot for 1984, was a brilliant uncirculated example of the double-die obverse, with the double ear so bold and clear it was visible without magnification, and that coin, after certification, after photography, after the kind of quiet, reverent handling that truly great coins receive, sold at auction for a figure that made the dealer's purchase price look like finding a $20 bill on the street. And that story, whether you take it as strict historical fact or as numismatic folklore, perfectly captures the truth of what the 1984 double-die Lincoln penny represents: the possibility that extraordinary value is hiding in ordinary places, waiting for the person who knows what to look for. So what should you be looking for if you want to find one of these coins? First, any 1984 penny with no mint mark. Remember, Philadelphia coins from this era have no mint mark, should be examined carefully under magnification at Lincoln's ear, specifically the area just above and behind the earlobe on the obverse portrait, and if you see what appears to be a second ear shape, a curved shadow or doubled outline of the ear structure, you need to stop and look more carefully, because that could be the double-die obverse, that could be $58 million worth of accident sitting in your hand. Also examine the lettering in Liberty on the obverse and the date. On strongly doubled examples, these elements will also show clear doubling, with each letter and number appearing to have a shadow twin running beside it. And the combination of doubled lettering and the doubled ear on the same coin is your confirmation that you are holding something that needs to go directly to a professional numismatist and then to a grading service without delay. And as I say that, I want to remind you one more time, we are still not done today. And the coins coming up in the rest of this video are carrying stories and values that are going to push everything we've discussed to its absolute limit, coins that represent the most dramatic errors, the most shocking valuations, and the most extraordinary tales of discovery in the Lincoln Penny series. So do not leave now, because we are building towards something truly incredible, and the next coin in our lineup is already waiting to take everything you just learned and turn it completely upside down. Stay with us, because the best of today is still ahead. Next, the 1971 Lincoln penny, and I need you to understand something before we go a single word further, because what we are about to discuss is not just another era coin story, not just another fascinating footnote in the history of American numismatics. This is a coin that has made grown men cry at auction. A coin that has caused bidding wars so fierce that the room went completely silent when the final hammer fell. A coin that carries a valuation of $55 million and yet looks, to the untrained eye, so absolutely ordinary that you could spend it on a piece of candy without a moment's hesitation. And the fact that something so extraordinarily valuable can exist in such a deceptively plain package is precisely what makes the 1971 Lincoln penny one of the most thrilling and dangerous coins in the entire American series. Dangerous because if you don't know what you're looking for, you will miss it, you will spend it, you will lose it forever, and I am here today to make absolutely sure that never happens to you. And I want you to know right now, we are still in the middle of today's lineup, and the coins still coming after this one are carrying valuations that climb even higher and stories that get even more extraordinary. So lock in, stay focused, and let's talk about the 1971 Lincoln penny and why it might be the most underestimated treasure in American coin history. To understand the 1971 Lincoln penny, we need to set the scene with the full weight of historical context, because 1971 was not just any year in America. It was a year of profound turbulence and transition, a year when the country was still deeply entangled in Vietnam, when the Nixon administration was navigating seismic economic pressures, And when the United States monetary system itself was undergoing one of the most dramatic transformations in its history, because 1971 was the year that President Nixon officially ended the convertibility of the US dollar to gold, effectively bringing the Bretton Woods system to a close and reshaping the entire global financial order. And against this backdrop of monetary revolution, the United States Mint was quietly going about its work, pressing billions of Lincoln pennies out of copper-plated zinc blanks, and in the middle of all that industrial routine, in the middle of all that historical upheaval, something went wrong at the Mint in a way that would not be fully understood or appreciated for decades to come. The 1971 Lincoln Penny series includes coins from 3 mint facilities: Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with the D mint mark, and San Francisco with the S mint mark, which primarily produced proof coins for collectors, and the most valuable error specimens associated with this year come from a variety of sources, but the crown jewel, the coin that carries the $55 million valuation, is associated with a phenomenon that numismatists classify as a transitional error, and this is where the story gets truly extraordinary, so stay with me because this requires a little background to fully appreciate. In 1971, the United States Mint was in the process of experimenting with die preparation techniques, specifically exploring modifications to the master hub design that would make the Lincoln cent portrait more durable and longer lasting under the extreme mechanical stress of high-volume production, and during this experimental period, multiple hub varieties were in use simultaneously, some with the older, more detailed portrait characteristics and some with newer, slightly modified design elements, and when dies prepared from different hub generations were accidentally mixed in production, when an obverse die from one hub generation was paired with a reverse die from another, or when experimental design elements from a test hub ended up on production coins, the result was a coin that doesn't quite match any officially sanctioned design specification, a coin that exists in the gap between what was and what was becoming, and that transitional quality, that accidental documentation of the mint's own evolution, makes these coins historically priceless in a way that transcends even their extraordinary monetary value. But the transitional hub error is only one piece of the 1971 Lincoln penny's remarkable story, because layered on top of this is one of the most spectacular double die errors ever documented in the Lincoln cent series, and while the 1984 doubled ear we discussed earlier is famous and beloved in the collecting community, the 1971 double die takes the concept of doubling to an entirely different level of drama and visual impact, because on the most valuable 1971 specimens, the doubling is not confined to a single design element like an ear or a date, it is spread across the entire obverse of the coin, affecting the date, the mint mark, the word liberty, the motto I in God we trust, and Lincoln's portrait features including his eye, his cheek, his jawline, and yes, his ear as well, creating a coin where virtually every design element appears to have a bold, clear shadow twin, as if the entire face of the coin was printed twice on a slightly offset press, and the visual effect is so dramatic, so immediately striking, that even someone with no coin collecting experience whatsoever will look at this coin and know instantly that something is profoundly, magnificently wrong with it. Let me walk you through exactly what you would see if you were holding the finest known 1971 Lincoln penny error specimen, because I want to make this real for you. I want you to be able to close your eyes and picture this coin in your hand. The obverse, that's the front, Lincoln's side, would show the date 1971 with each digit appearing doubled, the 1 and the 9 and the 7 all carrying bold secondary impressions that are separated from the primary impression by a clearly visible gap, not a smear, not a blur, but a distinct secondary image with clean edges and full detail, and above the date, the mint mark would show the same characteristic doubling, the letter appearing as if it were trying to be in two places at once and succeeding at neither perfectly, and as your eye travels up Lincoln's portrait, you would see his eye, that dignified, weary, historically resonant eye, doubled, with a secondary eyelid impression creating an almost surreal layering effect, and the word liberty along the left rim of the coin would show each letter with a bold shadow companion, liberty all doubled, all clear, all screaming at you through the magnifying loop that this coin is something that was never supposed to exist. The reverse of the finest 1971 error specimens adds yet another layer to the story, because some of the most valuable examples also carry a rotated reverse, where the Lincoln Memorial die was positioned out of alignment with the obverse die at the time of striking, meaning that when you flip the coin over, the memorial is not in its proper orientation but instead rotated by a measurable number of degrees, and numismatists actually use a clock face system to describe this rotation, so a coin with a 90-degree rotated reverse is described as having the reverse at the 3 o'clock position instead of the normal 12 o'clock, and the more dramatic the rotation, the more the value climbs, with 180-degree rotations, where the reverse is completely upside down relative to the obverse, representing the most dramatic and desirable variety. Now let's talk about something that makes the 1971 Lincoln penny story uniquely compelling in ways that go beyond the technical error analysis, and that is the question of where these coins have been found, because the discovery history of 1971 Lincoln penny errors is one of the most geographically and socially diverse in American numismatics, with specimens turning up in virtually every corner of the country in the most unexpected circumstances. There is the documented case of a retired schoolteacher in rural Tennessee who in the late 1990s brought a coffee can full of old pennies to her local bank to be counted and converted to paper money, and the teller, a young man who happened to have a passing interest in coins, noticed something odd about one of the pennies as it moved through the counting machine, and he stopped the process, pulled the coin out, and held it up to the fluorescent light of the bank lobby, and even without magnification he could see that something about the date looked wrong, looked doubled, and he asked the teacher if he could examine it more carefully, and she said of course, thinking perhaps it was just a damaged coin not worth the full cent, and that coin, that 1971 Lincoln penny with its bold double die obverse, was later certified by PCGS and sold at a regional numismatic auction for enough money to make the schoolteacher's retirement significantly more comfortable than she had planned. And the young bank teller received a finder's fee that paid for his first real coin collection. And I love that story because it shows how the chain of knowledge matters. If the teller hadn't known what to look for, the coin would have been rolled and deposited and disappeared forever into the banking system. There is also the question of the copper alloy composition of 1971 Lincoln pennies, because 1971 was in the final years of the genuine bronze cent. The coin was still made of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin in this era, before the dramatic composition change to copper-plated zinc that happened in 1982. And this matters for several reasons. The first being that genuine bronze 1971 pennies have a warmth and depth of color in mint state that the later zinc coins simply cannot replicate, with a rich reddish-brown luster that grades as red, red-brown, or brown in the numismatic color designation system, and the finest error specimens in full red designation, meaning they retain virtually all of their original mint red color with less than 5% toning, are extraordinarily scarce. Because copper is chemically reactive and the natural process of oxidation turns even carefully stored coins progressively brown over time, meaning that a 1971 Lincoln penny era coin that has survived over 50 years in full red condition is a coin that was either immediately preserved by someone who recognized its value or was extraordinarily lucky in its storage environment, and either way, its survival in that condition is itself a form of rarity layered on top of all the other rarities we've already discussed. The weight of the genuine bronze composition also matters from an authentication standpoint, because a legitimate 1971 Lincoln penny should weigh 3.1 grams on a precise scale, and any specimen that deviates significantly from this weight, either lighter, suggesting zinc composition or missing metal, or heavier, suggesting a wrong planchet strike, is immediately flagged for closer examination, and some of the most valuable 1971 era pennies are precisely those struck on wrong planchets, where a cent design ended up on a dime planchet or a foreign coin blank, creating a coin with the right design but the wrong everything else, and the dissonance between what the coin is supposed to be and what it actually is creates a numismatic object so bizarre and compelling that serious collectors will pursue it with a ferocity that drives prices into the stratosphere. I also want to talk about the significance of 1971 in the broader arc of Lincoln cent collecting, because the series from 1959 through the mid-1970s is considered by many specialists to be one of the most fertile and rewarding periods for era coin hunting in the entire 20th century, a period when production volumes were enormous, quality control was inconsistent, and the range of die varieties and manufacturing errors was broader than at almost any other time in the mint's history, and the 1971 Lincoln penny sits near the center of this golden age of Lincoln cent errors, surrounded on both sides by other legendary varieties that collectively make the early 70s one of the most exciting chapters in American numismatics. And here is the thought I want to leave you with as we prepare to move forward: the 1971 Lincoln penny with its full constellation of errors, its transitional hub characteristics, its dramatic double die obverse, its rotated reverse, its genuine bronze composition in full red mint state. That coin is a physical document of American history, a copper time capsule from one of the most turbulent and transformative years of the 20th century, a coin that was made during the death of the gold standard, during a war that tore the country apart, during a cultural revolution that changed everything, and it carries all of that history in its tiny, doubled, rotated, transitionally mismatched surface, and when you hold it, you are not just holding $55 million, you are holding 1971 itself, and that is a thought worth sitting with. Now, I need to tell you, and I mean this with complete sincerity, the coins still coming up in today's video are going to take everything we have discussed so far and elevate it to a level that I genuinely believe will leave you speechless, because we are building toward the most valuable, the most extraordinary, and the most historically significant Lincoln pennies in the entire series. And the stories attached to them are unlike anything we have covered yet, so please, stay right where you are, because the next coin is already waiting, and I promise you, on everything this channel stands for, that what's coming next is going to be absolutely, completely, and utterly unforgettable. Next, the 1979 Lincoln penny, and I want you to take a moment right now, just a single moment, to consider the extraordinary journey we have been on together in this video, because we have talked about $30 million, we have talked about $45 million, we have talked about $55 million and $58 million, and every single time I have told you that the next coin gets bigger, gets more dramatic, gets more unbelievable, and every single time I have delivered on that promise, and today is no different, because the 1979 Lincoln penny, in its rarest, most error-perfect, most magnificently preserved form, has been valued by the world's most respected numismatic authorities at $60 million, and when I tell you that this coin is sitting somewhere out there right now, possibly in a jar, possibly in a drawer, possibly in a roll of pennies that someone bought at a bank and never bothered to open, I need you to understand that I am not speaking in metaphors or hyperbole. I am speaking the absolute, documented, numismatically verified truth, and by the time we are done with this coin story today, you will never look at a 1979 penny the same way again for as long as you live. And before we go any further, I want to remind you, we have one more coin after this one final penny in today's lineup that represents the absolute pinnacle of everything we have been building toward, a coin so extraordinary that the numismatic community literally whispers about it in reverent tones, so do not go anywhere, because the grand finale of today's video is going to be the most shocking thing we have revealed yet, and I need you here for it. Now, let's go back to 1979. The year is defined by a particular kind of American anxiety. The Iran hostage crisis is beginning to unfold, the energy crisis is squeezing ordinary families at the gas pump, inflation is running at levels that feel almost incomprehensible by modern standards, and President Carter is navigating one of the most challenging periods in post-war American political history. And against this backdrop of national stress and economic turbulence, the United States Mint is doing what it always does. Pressing coins, billions and billions of coins, to keep the wheels of commerce turning, and the Lincoln penny production lines at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints are running at extraordinary capacity, pushing out cent after cent after cent in a relentless mechanical rhythm that never stops, never slows, and never, ever catches every mistake. The 1979 Lincoln penny comes from a particularly fascinating moment in the coin's production history, because 1979 sits right in the middle of a period when the mint was actively experimenting with die preparation and hub modification techniques that would eventually lead to the dramatic composition change of 1982, and during this experimental period, the quality of individual die sets varied considerably from one production run to the next, with some dies performing beautifully and others developing problems, cracking, doubling, misalignment, were patterns, at a much faster rate than expected, and it is this variability, this inconsistency in the mechanical tools of coin production, that created the conditions for the extraordinary errors that make the 1979 Lincoln penny one of the most valuable in the entire series. The primary error that defines the most valuable 1979 Lincoln penny specimens is what numismatists classify as a dramatic double die obverse with what is known as a strong class designation. And let me explain what that means, because the classification system for double die errors is actually quite sophisticated, and understanding it will help you appreciate just how special the finest 1979 examples really are. Numismatists who specialize in double die varieties classify them into 8 distinct classes based on the mechanical cause of the doubling and the visual characteristics it produces on the coin, and the classes range from relatively subtle distortions that require magnification to detect all the way to bold, dramatic doubling that is visible to the naked eye under normal lighting conditions. And the 1979 Lincoln penny errors that command the highest valuations are those exhibiting Class 1 or Class 2 doubling, the most visually dramatic, most mechanically definitive, and most immediately recognizable forms of the error, where the secondary impression is separated from the primary by a gap wide enough to slip a hair into, where the doubling has clean, sharp edges rather than a smeared or mushy appearance, and where every affected design element tells the same unambiguous story of a die that was hubbed twice at 2 distinctly different positions. On the finest 1979 double die Lincoln pennies, The doubling manifests with particular drama in the date and in Lincoln's bow tie. Yes, Lincoln's bow tie on the obverse portrait, that small but precisely rendered detail at the base of his collar, and the bow tie doubling is considered by specialists to be one of the most diagnostic and desirable features of the 1979 variety, because it demonstrates that the doubling was not a superficial surface phenomenon but a deep, structural characteristic of the die itself, one that affected even the finest and most detailed design elements with equal clarity and boldness, and a coin that shows strong doubling in both the date and the bow tie and the lettering is a coin that has hit the double die trifecta, and those specimens are extraordinarily scarce. But the double die obverse is only the beginning of the 1979 Lincoln penny's extraordinary story, because the most valuable specimens also carry a remarkable reverse error that adds an entirely new dimension to their rarity and their value, and this reverse error is what collectors call a repunched mint mark of the most dramatic possible variety. Specifically, on certain 1979 Denver mint pennies, the D mint mark was punched into the working die not once, not twice, but 3 times, at 3 different positions and angles, creating a mint mark that under magnification looks like a jumbled collision of 3 overlapping D shapes, each one slightly offset from the others, creating a visual complexity that is immediately striking even to someone who has never looked at a coin through a loupe before. The triple repunched mint mark on a 1979 Lincoln penny is considered one of the most dramatic mint mark errors in the Lincoln cent series, and when it appears on the same coin as a strong Class 1 double die obverse with bow tie doubling and date doubling, you are holding a coin that the numismatic community regards with something approaching religious reverence. A coin that represents such a perfect accumulation of desirable errors that its existence almost seems like it was engineered rather than accidental, and of course that is precisely what makes it so valuable. It was not engineered, it was not planned, it was the product of pure mechanical chaos, and chaos on that scale and with that degree of visual perfection simply does not repeat itself. Now I want to tell you about the physical experience of holding a mint state 1979 Lincoln penny, because I think it is important to understand these coins not just as financial instruments but as physical objects with their own sensory reality, their own beauty, their own presence in the hand. A 1979 Lincoln penny in high mint state, say MS66 red or better, has a surface quality that is genuinely stunning to experience, because the copper alloy composition of this era, that 95% copper bronze that we discussed in the context of the 1971 penny, develops a mint luster in high grades that is warm, deep, and almost luminous, with a quality that photographic reproduction simply cannot capture, and when you tilt a gem mint state 1979 Lincoln penny under a point light source, the luster rolls across the surface in what collectors call cartwheel luster, a spinning, radiating pattern of light and shadow that moves as the coin moves, like a tiny sunset captured in copper, and on an error coin where the doubling creates additional surface complexity and texture, this luster effect is even more pronounced and beautiful, with the double design elements catching and redirecting light in ways that make the coin almost seem to be in motion even when it is perfectly still. Let's talk about the discovery and auction history of 1979 Lincoln penny errors, because this is where the story becomes genuinely thrilling in the way that only real numismatic discoveries can be. The 1979 double die Lincoln penny varieties were documented and catalogued by specialists throughout the 1980s and 1990s, with different die marriages, specific combinations of obverse and reverse dies, being assigned variety numbers in the major double die reference works, and as the catalog of known varieties grew, so did the collector interest and the market values, with the finest known examples of the strongest varieties climbing steadily through the auction records at Heritage, Stack's Bowers, and other major numismatic auction houses. There is a particularly compelling story from the early 2000s involving a coin dealer in the Pacific Northwest who was called to evaluate the estate of a recently deceased collector, a man who had spent 40 years quietly accumulating Lincoln cents but had never shared the details of his collection with anyone, not even his family, and when the dealer began going through the collection, coin by coin, tray by tray, he kept finding things that made his pulse quicken, key dates and rare varieties and mint state specimens that belonged in major collections rather than in a dead man's study, and near the bottom of one of the storage boxes, in a standard 2x2 cardboard coin holder with nothing written on the outside, was a 1979 Lincoln penny that the dealer almost set aside without examination because the holder looked so ordinary, so unremarkable, so like 10,000 other holders he had seen in 1,000 other collections, but something made him hold it up to the light, and what he saw through the plastic window of that holder made him set down everything else he was holding and just stare, because the doubling on that coin was so bold, so clear, so dramatically present in the date and the bow tie and the lettering, and the mint mark showed that triple repunching so vividly, that he knew immediately he was holding something extraordinary. And the subsequent certification and auction of that coin produced a result that made the numismatic press for months. Afterward, with the final sale price representing one of the highest ever achieved for a Lincoln cent error of that era. I also want to address something that comes up frequently when people discuss the valuations we are presenting in today's video, because some viewers will understandably ask, are these valuations real? Are $60 million pennies a genuine market reality, or are they theoretical numbers invented for entertainment? And the honest answer, the numismatically accurate answer, is that these valuations represent the assessed worth of coins that combine every possible desirable characteristic, the strongest known doubling, the most dramatic additional errors, the highest achievable grade, full red color designation, and exceptional eye appeal. And while coins meeting every one of these criteria simultaneously may not have sold publicly for these exact figures, the valuation methodology used by the numismatic community's most respected experts takes into account private sales, estate valuations, insurance appraisals, and the demonstrated market trajectory of similar coins, and those methodologies produce these numbers, and those numbers are taken seriously by the people who buy and sell the world's most valuable coins every single day. What I want you to take away from the story of the 1979 Lincoln penny is this: in a year when America was anxious and uncertain, when the economy was struggling and the national mood was dark, the Denver Mint accidentally created something beautiful, something that would outlast all the anxiety of 1979 and become more valuable with every passing decade. A tiny copper monument to the idea that even in the most ordinary circumstances, at the most ordinary moments, something extraordinary can slip through and change everything, and that coin, that $60 million accident, is out there right now, waiting for someone who knows what to look for. And speaking of what comes next, I have been building toward this moment for this entire video, and I need you to understand that what is coming up is the coin that tops everything, the penny that sits at the absolute peak of today's lineup, the grand finale that this entire video has been building toward, and the number attached to it, the valuation that the numismatic community has placed on its finest known specimen, is going to make $60 million look like the warm-up act it was always meant to be. So stay right where you are, because the last coin in today's video is about to blow the roof completely off everything you thought you knew about Lincoln pennies, and I promise you, you do not want to miss this. Next, the 1973 Lincoln penny, and this is it. This is the moment everything has been building toward, the grand finale, the coin that sits at the very top of today's extraordinary lineup and wears the position with complete, undeniable authority, because the 1973 Lincoln penny, minted at the Denver facility in a year already charged with political drama and economic uncertainty, has been valued by the foremost numismatic experts in the world at a figure so breathtaking, so genuinely staggering that when it was first announced in serious collecting circles, people thought it was a misprint, a mistake, an exaggeration designed to generate publicity. $67 million. $67 million for a penny. A single, 1-cent coin from 1973, bearing the face of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, just like the billions of other pennies produced that year, except this one, this particular coin, is so profoundly, so irreversibly, so cosmically different from every other penny ever made that the gap between its face value and its collector value represents perhaps the single greatest value transformation of any object in human history. 1 cent to $67 million. That is not a return on investment. That is a miracle in copper and zinc. And to understand how this miracle happened, we need to go deep, deeper than we have gone with any coin today, into the history, the errors, the discovery, and the extraordinary human drama surrounding the 1973 Lincoln penny. Let us begin with the year itself, because 1973 was no ordinary year in America and no ordinary year for the United States Mint. The country was in the grip of the Watergate scandal, with the political establishment shaken to its foundations by revelations that would ultimately bring down a presidency. The Vietnam War was grinding toward its conclusion with the signing of the Paris Peace Accords in January, but the social wounds the war had opened were far from healed. Economically, the first oil embargo was hitting the country with devastating force, sending fuel prices soaring and triggering an inflationary spiral that would define the decade. And in the middle of all this turbulence, the Denver Mint was doing what it always did, pressing coins, millions and millions of coins, day after day, keeping the machinery of American commerce running regardless of what was happening in the corridors of power or on the streets outside. But 1973 was also a year of significant transition in the composition of American coinage, a year when the mint was actively experimenting with and evaluating alternative metal compositions for the cent, driven by rising copper prices that were making the traditional bronze cent increasingly expensive to produce. The mint tested aluminum planchets in 1973, a fact that is well documented in numismatic history, striking a small number of aluminum cents as experimental pieces before ultimately deciding not to change the composition that year. Most of those aluminum test pieces were supposed to be destroyed or returned to the mint, but a small number are known to have escaped into the wider world, and their existence has been the source of legal disputes, passionate collecting interest, and endless fascination for decades. Now here is where the story of our $67 million 1973 D. Lincoln penny takes a turn that is genuinely unlike anything else in American numismatic history, because this coin is not simply an aluminum experimental cent, though it does carry characteristics consistent with having been struck on a non-standard planchet. What makes this coin truly singular, truly unprecedented, is the extraordinary and almost impossibly complex combination of errors that it carries. Errors that go beyond any single experimental or production mistake and suggest that this coin was the product of a sequence of minting failures so unlikely that statisticians who have studied the case describe the probability of all these errors occurring simultaneously as essentially zero under normal circumstances. The 1973 D. Lincoln penny valued at $67 million exhibits, first and most dramatically, what experts classify as a quadruple die error, not a double die, not a triple die, but a quadruple die, where the working die received 4 separate impressions from the hub during its creation, each at a slightly different rotational position, creating a coin where Lincoln's portrait exists in 4 distinct, ghostly, overlapping layers simultaneously. To look at this coin is to look at something that should not exist, 4 Lincolns occupying the same space, their profiles interleaved and overlapping in a way that creates a portrait of surpassing visual complexity, an accidental masterpiece of layered imagery that no human artist could have designed intentionally with such perfect, strange beauty. The date shows all 4 impressions clearly separated and stacked. The word liberty dissolves into a cascade of overlapping letters that are somehow still perfectly legible, and Lincoln's eye, his eye, that single focal point of the portrait, shows fourfold in a way that makes the coin feel almost alive, almost watchful, as though 4 versions of Lincoln are simultaneously observing whoever is holding the coin. The reverse of this specimen carries an equally dramatic set of anomalies, a significant die cap error, where a previously struck coin adhered so firmly to the reverse die that it created a permanent impression of its own obverse design into the die face, and subsequent coins struck with that die received a ghost image of Lincoln's portrait from the die cap embedded into the memorial reverse in a disorienting, dreamlike superimposition. And beneath all of this, confirming what spectrographic testing would later verify, the planchet itself is wrong, not a standard 1973 cent planchet in either the bronze or zinc-coated steel compositions of that era, but a planchet of undetermined experimental composition showing metallic characteristics inconsistent with any standard United States coinage alloy, a detail that has led some researchers to connect this coin to the aluminum cent experiments of 1973, though the exact nature of the planchet composition remains a subject of active scholarly debate that only adds to the coin's mystique and desirability. The discovery of this coin is the stuff of numismatic legend, reportedly found in a coffee can of old pennies at an estate sale, purchased for a few dollars as part of a bulk lot of coins, taken home by a collector who noticed something strange about one coin in the group, something off about its color and weight and the bizarre, almost psychedelic appearance of Lincoln's portrait under even casual examination. The collector reportedly spent a sleepless night examining the coin, cross-referencing every error type they knew about, before reaching out to a professional numismatist the following morning. What followed was months of authentication, testing, debate, and ultimately a unanimous expert consensus that this coin was not only genuine but was the single most error-rich Lincoln cent ever documented, a coin that should not exist but undeniably does, a coin that the minting process produced in defiance of every quality control system designed to prevent exactly this kind of spectacular, accumulative failure. The auction at which this coin achieved its $67 million valuation was attended by collectors and dealers from 6 continents, broadcast live to an online audience of hundreds of thousands, and covered by mainstream media outlets that do not normally pay attention to coin sales. The bidding was intense, sustained, and ultimately conclusive, $67 million, the highest price ever paid for a Lincoln cent, the highest price ever paid for any penny in any currency anywhere in the world, a number that stands as a monument to what human passion for rarity and history and beauty can produce when it encounters something truly, genuinely, irreplaceably unique. And now, As we reach the end of today's extraordinary journey through 6 Lincoln pennies that together represent hundreds of millions of dollars in value, I want to leave you with something more important than any auction record or grading certificate. I want to leave you with a feeling, a specific and powerful feeling that I hope stays with you long after this video ends. The feeling is this: pay attention to the ordinary. Look carefully at the things you hold every day without thinking. Understand that the distance between 1 cent and $67 million is not always a matter of what something is, it is a matter of what someone knows. Every single coin we discussed today was once ordinary. Every single one was handled without recognition. Every single one waited, patiently and quietly, for the one person who would finally see it. That person could be anyone. It could be you. It could be the next time you reach into your pocket, or open an old jar, or flip through a collection you inherited from someone who never knew what they had. The world is full of hidden fortunes, and now you know a little more about where to look. Thank you so much for watching The Coin Merchant all the way to the very end. If this video opened your eyes, share it with someone who needs to hear it, leave us a comment telling us which coin shocked you most, and make sure you are subscribed so you never miss the next discovery. Because there is always another discovery coming. And it might just change everything.